Money Nerds. Today we're talking about 3 rituals that you need to include in your financial life that will keep you on track without feeling deprived. So let's go ahead and dive in. First and foremost, if you are not familiar with the difference between a ritual and a habit, they differ slightly. So a habit is something that you do consistently, and usually it's unintentionally. It's not always, but typically that's the case. A ritual is different. A ritual is a little bit more intention behind what you're actually doing, and so it has an element of thoughtfulness that habits occasionally can have, but not always. So here's the short way to remember the difference between a habit and a ritual. A habit is what you do. A ritual is how and why you do it. So these are 3 rituals that I personally go back to over and over again, especially if I feel like I'm getting a little bit off track or I'm just not feeling in the best state of mind with my finances. It's usually these 3 things that are kind of lacking or that I've been slacking on. So let's start with the first money ritual that I think everybody should adopt, but I personally have to go back to over and over again, and that is mastering the grocery game. I see a lot of budgets, especially with my coaching clients, and one of the common themes that I find over and over again is people overspending on groceries. Now, this is a tough one because a lot of times people say, I don't really have a lot of food waste. I don't think I'm overspending. How do you find that to be the case? And so what I usually see is that it's not necessarily that you're not eating all of your food. Sometimes it's just that lack of intentionality where you are always adding to your pantry instead of going through what you currently have. So there is almost an element of food waste because it's not very intentional and it can always be improved. I was working with a coaching client not that long ago whose grocery bill was $2,000 a month for a family of 4. Now, that's a lot of money. Like, yes, it depends on where you live, but where this person lived, that was a ton of money. It was almost too much because it was taking such a big chunk of their income every month that they weren't able to make progress towards their other goals. And every month they were adding to their credit card debt. And so that's when it tells me as a coach, like, hey, we got to revisit, we got to reassess and figure out how do we get this under control and build some type of ritual around this so that you're staying within budget, you're not blowing your money, and you feel good about your progress. So here are some things I personally do when it comes to my money rituals. The first thing, shopping less frequently. I like to shop at least once a week, and that's it. I find that every time you go to the store just to pick up those like little small things, that's where you find it adds to it every single time, right? No duh. The more you shop, the more you're gonna spend. And so the same thing is true for our groceries. So having that list where it's like, okay, here's my once a week list of what I need and that's all I'm doing, it really does make a difference. Okay, so this leads me to the next part of this money ritual, which is shopping your pantry first. Now, this is such a great way to go because it makes a big difference when it comes to finding what to add to your grocery list and not just like blowing through money. Here's how it looks in practice. In my household, the way this works, it's very raw and unfiltered, but here it is. I will open up the pantry door and I will shout out, hey, we have rice, we have spaghetti noodles, we have tuna, we have taco shells that are going to be going bad. Like, I'll just shout out everything that we have that we currently need to kind of go through or has been sitting in the pantry a while. I will also mention things that are getting ready to expire. I try to organize like the earlier expiration dates. Those ones are a little bit closer to the front of the pantry, and then the ones that are newer go towards the back. It's not perfect, but it kind of works. And then I will tell Tony what we have. He'll kind of like make a little mental note, and then I'll go over to the fridge. I'll open up the fridge and I'll say, okay, we have this, this, and this, and in the freezer we have tilapia, we have shrimp, we have chicken, and we have some ground turkey that we need to defrost. So from there, we can start to create some type of a meal plan. Once we have that in place, it's super basic, you guys. Like, it's Monday tacos, it's Tuesday tilapia and rice. It's Wednesday, I'm picking basil from my garden and we're doing cherry tomatoes and basil and garlic and sauteing that into a pasta sauce with spaghetti and ground turkey. Like, it's super, super basic. And honestly, we have to keep our meals really basic right now too, because we have a baby. So we are just slammed right now. And anytime we can even cook, we call that a win. And so because of that, that's kind of how it works. So then based off of shopping our pantry and our fridge and freezer first, we can then say, okay, let's add cherry tomatoes to our grocery list. And then we'll write that down. Let's add cheddar cheese to our grocery list, write that down. So we start to go through and we start to make our list based off of what are we lacking for the existing meal plan that we put together. That is super simple, but the reason why it works so much is because we're not going to Pinterest or to blogs or Instagram or YouTube and watching videos or looking at blogs and saying, okay, this is a great meal plan, we're going to do this. We're actually shopping what we currently have first, and that is where you start to save money, because you're not just buying all new ingredients every single week when inspiration hits. You're using what you currently have. And so most of the time when we do this consistently, now given we're a family of three, I say three loosely. I have a 9-month-old, so she doesn't eat, like she just taste tests stuff really, so it's not quite to the same degree. But when we are not paying attention, we can easily spend $700-800. When we are paying attention, we can bring that down to $300 to $400. $400 if we're like adding some extra crap to our cart that we really didn't need, but we can start to bring that down just a hair more. So it does make a difference. I see it in myself. I see a huge difference there. The other thing that I have to remind myself of, when you have like a shopping problem and maybe you just like constantly want to add to cart and buy from Amazon, and one of the rules that we often put into place is that 24-hour think about it rule. This is the same thing for your grocery plan. Delaying the craving is one of the best things you can do. So lately I've been having a craving for peach cobbler. Don't know where this comes from. I have no idea. It just like hit one day and I was like, God, that sounds good. So instead of immediately buying the stuff to make that, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to think about it for a week. If I still want to make stupid peach cobbler next week, I will buy the stuff to allow myself permission to do this, but I have to delay it just a hair. Because a lot of times, even when it comes to grocery shopping and cooking and stuff, it sometimes is an element of impulsivity instead of intentionality. I saw this cool recipe on Instagram and now I want to try it myself. It's very rarely overly thoughtful. It's just like, that sounds good, I want to try it. And so delaying those cravings even by a week makes a big difference. And then you can still have permission to go do all the fun recipes and try those things, but it's more thoughtful and more intentional, and you can actually budget around that a lot easier. Okay, so that's our first ritual, master the grocery game. The second money ritual, weekly money dates. We talk about money dates a lot on the podcast, a ton actually, and for good reason. They work. They truly do work, but there is a system and there is a strategy. What I find so often is so many people will start to create a budget, they'll put together a plan, and then they just don't look at it. They get to the end of the month, they compare their numbers to what they budgeted versus what they actually spent, and then they're upset because they're like, well, what the heck? I was so far off. Budgets don't work. This is stupid. I'm not going to do it any longer. And instead of blaming the budget or themselves, instead of holding themselves accountable, they blame the budget, which is really, it's just numbers on paper. It really doesn't mean anything. But what does matter is the system that they use to try to stick with their budget. We're not looking for perfection, but we are looking for progress and intentionality. Yet again, that's the buzzword for this episode. But what I often see is that without having these weekly money dates and these set-aside periods where you can just check in with your finances and see how everything's looking, you probably will never really stick to a budget. Never truly. So let's create a system around money dates so that you have a plan to follow. Now, again, this is what I personally do in my own life. It works. I am a big fan, and I do find success when I use it. The first thing I do is I update my financial dashboard. A financial dashboard, don't get nerdy about this, it's super, super simple. I have a Google Sheet, and on my Google Sheet, I have my numbers, I have my budget, I have a debt tab, my statement balance. I like to track that kind of stuff too. If you have any car loans, that's where you would add that, student loans, house loan, whatever, right? So you would add that all on your debt tab. There's also a tab for your net worth. And that is a fun thing to track, I think, every 6 to 12 months. Some people do this monthly. I just prefer 6 months. I also have a tab on my financial dashboard that's for my monthly budget. And then I have another section that's for my expense tracking for variable expenses only. I don't track to the same degree that I do variable as I would with fixed. Fixed is really easy, right? You just write down bills. That's pretty straightforward. Your variable one is the one you have a little bit more control over. So that's the one that I like to pay closer attention to and track more frequently and more religiously. The other thing I have on my financial dashboard is a tab for annual and upcoming expenses. I like to include things like, yes, my HOA, my car insurance that I pay every 6 months. I also like to include the last time I purchased skincare products or any makeup or hair products so that I can start to see how long this stuff actually lasts me. So when I'm looking at my budget for the month, I can look at that tab and then start to create a plan for like, okay, I got to set aside, I don't know, $50 in cash for this makeup that I'm out of. So updating my financial dashboard on a weekly basis keeps me sane and keeps me in check. What I'm looking for specifically on the money dates that I'm actually updating is my budget tab. So on my dashboard, on my budget, I have income, I have all of my expenses, I have my estimated income, my estimated expenses, and then I have a section for actual so I can see exactly to the penny how much I've spent. That's what I'm updating, that actual column of my budget, because I want to see to the penny how much money I have left. And it is a really helpful tool because it gives you that almost freedom to look at your numbers and say, shoot, I'm getting really close to my groceries and my eating out is really low. Maybe I can borrow from my eating out, reduce that, and then put that towards my grocery budget instead. So you have more time to be able to course correct and to pivot instead of waiting to the end of the month and going, what the heck, I messed up again and here I am. Budgets just don't work. It gives you more control in real time. The second thing that I'm doing during my money dates is I'm checking my balances. I'm updating credit card balances. I'm making sure that I have my credit cards completely paid off in full before the end of the month or before that balance is due so that I have no interest on my credit cards. That's another thing that I'm looking at, and just making sure too that any of the due dates don't sneak up on you. You're covered. You know what you're facing when it comes to your credit cards. Third thing to look at with your money ritual is your goals. I like to look at my goals on a monthly basis. I find that these weekly check-ins are helpful for that. So I might set some financial goals for the month. Maybe it's to stick within a certain number. Maybe it's to invest a certain amount. Whatever the case might be, I like to look at that and see how I'm doing. I also like to set goals that aren't always numerical or quantifiable. I like to sometimes do things that are a little bit more personal and more holistic, like reading from a book for a certain amount of pages. But essentially what you're looking at here is with your goals, are you on track or do you need to pivot? The fourth thing that I like to do is create a weekly plan. Now, when I started budgeting, I was first getting going on paying off debt. This is what I would do all the time, and it really worked for my brain. I would always look at whatever amount I had in my checking account as of that day. So say you have $1,500 in your checking account, and then I would subtract out a minimum balance. I personally always like to carry at least $500 in my checking account. I try not to go too much more than that, and I try not to go below that. But a $500 buffer in my checking account prevents me from any overdrafts or any unexpected charges that might clear and put me in a bad financial situation. It kind of prevents that from happening. So I do like to have $500. So on my weekly plan, I'm saying $1,500 here, $500 for my buffer. My available balance is actually only $1,000. But then I take it a step further. I say, okay, for the next week, what do I need to spend? I need to buy groceries and I need $75 worth of groceries. So I'll subtract out $75. I might have Netflix that's clearing. I'll subtract out $10 for Netflix. I might have, car insurance coming out. I will subtract that out. And this is all within the next week. So then I can start to see exactly to the penny how much money I truly have left. And that's where I can make weekly decisions as well. So if I were paying off debt, I would say, oh my gosh, I have an extra $200 for this week that doesn't need to go towards next week's bills and it doesn't need to go towards this week's. I'm just going to put that towards a credit card or my car loan. And so then you can start to make better decisions that way. But having that weekly plan in place is so helpful. Like, you've got to try it. It makes a huge difference. The next thing that I do on my weekly money dates is I invest my money. So this is a little bit different because it depends on how you have your investing set up. But for me personally, I have a Roth IRA, and my Roth IRA is connected to my checking account. I go through Vanguard. It's just the company I like. I like their brokerage. I like their research. I just like Vanguard in general. So what happens every single week is money gets moved from my checking account over to my Roth IRA. I'm currently doing a little experiment where it's $50 a week that just gets pulled from my checking account to my Roth IRA. And then I take it a step further because that money, when it's under a Roth, is not actually invested. And if you don't remember to take this next step when you're DIYing your investing or you're doing it on your own, it really is a bad thing because your money's not actually invested in the stock market. So then you take that next step. What you do is you then go choose your investments, you purchase those officially, and then you are invested. So that's what I do on a weekly basis, because there isn't a way, unless you're using Betterment or Wealthfront or something like that, where those will purchase your investments on your behalf. If you're doing other brokerages, you really do have to go in there and manually make that purchase for your ETFs or your index funds or individual stocks, whatever your strategy is. So you have to make sure you're doing that. So I do this on a weekly basis. It's just part of it. I just go invest. And even if it's only $50, I don't care. I still do it. The next step of this weekly money date is to check in with your partner. Now, this is true if you're in a relationship where it requires you talk about money, or you probably should be talking about money. Then you would say, hey, here's where we're sitting with our income. Here's where we're sitting with all of our expenses. Maybe just watch out here, here, and here. Or you can say, hey, what do you think about these categories? We've got a lot of extra money here. Do you think we need to spend that much, or should we move that to a trip or a car fund or your kid's 529? There's lots of freedom and flexibility there. And so having that partner check-in is going to keep you both on the same page and prevent you from having major money blowups. And then lastly, part of this weekly money date is a reflection period where I ask myself 3 questions, always 3 questions. What went well? What didn't go well? And what will I do differently next week? That little reflection period is where you start to get more intentional and hold yourself accountable to see what could you improve, or how did maybe the week get away from you, and what can you do to stay on track next week. It's such a small thing to do, but those periods of reflection give you the opportunity to, again, take accountability and make progress. Okay, the third money ritual is building your financial brain. The way I like to do this is I like to, instead of trying to learn all the things about money all at one time, I start to hone in on one specific area that I feel like I need to improve on. So when I was paying off my debt, the only content I was consuming, realistically, I was reading books on like holistic personal finance, like the whole picture of it, but I was really listening to like the Dave Ramsey debt-free screams all the time. Like that was at that time too. There wasn't a ton of financial voices out there, but that was one that I was just constantly listening to because I was trying to reprogram my brain to be excited about paying down debt, and it worked. It really did. So choosing a theme that you're going to focus on. If you find that maybe you're lacking in investing, and when you go out for drinks with your friends or your coworkers, they're talking about their index funds and how they're invested. And when you hear that, you're like, I have no idea. Like, this is like all Greek to me. I need to figure this out. That's a good indicator that you should just write that topic down and spend a month or two. Usually a month to a quarter is usually enough time to get a decent grasp on most topics. And so spending that time of saying, this is my theme. I'm going to learn everything I can about investing. That's it for the next quarter. Having that theme is going to help you stay on track, and it's going to give you some direction on what books to read, what podcasts to listen to, that kind of stuff. 30 minutes a week is really all you need to start to build up your financial knowledge. So this could be in a lot of different forms. Maybe it's physical books, maybe it's podcasts, could be audiobooks, maybe it's courses that are through Masterclass or Coursera or Skillshare, maybe it's podcasts or YouTube videos. There's so many different ways to learn. I think finding your mode and your method of learning and how you prefer to learn is always the best. But I will say you also have to cater to your lifestyle. Again, I've got a baby right now, so my lifestyle is crazy. But what I can do is I can listen to a podcast or audiobook when we're on our hour-long stroller walks. That's something that I can do to kind of multitask and still get that time. But if I was spending that time and requiring myself to read 10 pages every night of a book, I'm probably going to fail on that, because usually by the time I get the baby down, I'm down too. I'm exhausted. So that's just the method that I'm going through right now. So catering to my lifestyle has been really helpful for me too. But picking that financial topic that you want to learn more about for the next quarter, and then diving in and doing everything you possibly can to learn as much as you can on that subject in a way that fits for your lifestyle and your style of learning is going to be the best thing in the world. And that's a money ritual I think we should all go back to frequently. If you ever feel like you've learned everything you can about personal finance, it's probably time to go a little bit deeper on certain topics. There's never a lack of things to learn. There's so much to learn out there. Okay, I want to give you a little bonus money ritual as well. This is to celebrate the wins. Don't just budget, brag a little. Like, be excited about your progress and your wins. I think that's one of the things that we often are waiting for, this like grandiose, we met the goal and it's incredible and that's when I'll celebrate. But that's really not the part that matters. Like, that is cool. If you're trying to pay off debt, yes, that's incredible. When you do pay off that credit card, you're going to feel some relief, but you're not going to feel like your life has changed, because it's that day-to-day grind, those little things that you did every single day, those moments of saying no and sacrifice instead of saying yes. Those are the things that are going to stick with you longer, and that's the stuff that actually matters. That's the part where you look back and you're grateful for the journey instead of just achieving the goal. It's not just to cross that off. It's the process of who you become while you're chasing the goal, as cheesy as that sounds. That's the part that matters. And so celebrating those little wins along the way are so important. And if you have issues with overspending or you tend to be a big shopper, one of the things that you can try is a what I didn't buy list. This is so great because often we aren't celebrating the things that you didn't buy. So this would be things like, I was on a YouTube video and I saw, well, this is actually true. It was Jones Road Beauty, I think is what it's called. And there was like a kit that they had, and they're like, oh, this is like minimalist makeup. It's great. And I'm like sitting here, hair in the top of my head, sweatpants, drinking my coffee that I've microwaved 3 times by now, holding my baby. And I'm like, oh man, that's what I need. Don't need that really. But it's those moments where I could have purchased that and I said no instead. That's something that I would write down and say, I'm really glad I didn't do that. Then good for me. I didn't give in to my impulsivity. But having that list of things that you didn't buy and celebrating that can be a really great way to go to reframe your brain into being excited about the things that you said no to, so that you have the opportunity to say yes to the things that matter most. So that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed recording this. This is something that I find myself going back to over and over and over again, because we could all use a little extra help or a refresher with our rituals. There's no shame in that game. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you next week for another episode of the Money Nerds podcast. Bye.